Hello, tonight we journey far back to a time long before maps drew borders or emperors claimed thrones. Picture the vast plains of northern China, where a wide river winds slowly eastward, its waters thick with yellow silt carried from distant mountains. Mist rises from the surface in the cool mornings, and the air carries the earthy scent of wet soil after seasonal rains. This is the Huanghe, the Yellow River, flowing gently through fertile Los lands that have nourished life for millennia. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Human presence here stretches deep into the past. In the Paleolithic era, small bands of hunters and gatherers roamed these valleys, following herds across open grasslands. They crafted simple stone tools, flakes, and choppers to hunt deer, gather wild plants, and shelter in caves or temporary camps. Footprints from sites like Zhou near Beijing reveal early humans who tended fires and shaped their world with basic implements. You can almost hear the crackle of those ancient hearths on quiet evenings as families gathered under starlit skies. As the climate warmed after the last ice age, around 10,000 years ago, people began to settle more permanently. The Neolithic period brought change. Along the middle reaches of the Yellow River, in what we now call Henan, Shaanxi, and Shaanxi provinces, villages emerged. These early farmers cleared small plots, planting millet seeds in the rich, wind-blown loess soil that the river deposited each flood season. Pigs and dogs were domesticated, providing reliable food alongside hunted game and fished rivers. The Yangshao culture flourished here from about 5000 to 3000 BC. Villages like Bampo near modern Xi'an consisted of clustered round or square houses built partly underground for warmth, with thatched roofs and walls of packed earth and wood. In the center stood a larger communal building, perhaps for gatherings. People shaped clay by hand into pots, firing them in kilns dug into the ground. These vessels, bowls, jars, and urns were often painted in red, black, and white with flowing patterns, fish swirling like water, geometric lines echoing river bends, or stylized human faces gazing out. Imagine the soft glow of firelight reflecting on those painted surfaces as families shared meals of steamed millet and pork. Silk production may have begun here too, with mulberry leaves fed to silkworms. Tools were polished stone axes for clearing land, grinding stones for grain, and bone needles for sewing. Burial grounds lay separate from homes, with bodies placed in pits alongside pottery and tools for the journey beyond. Just as we seek comfort in familiar objects during uncertain times, they equipped their dead with everyday items, honoring ties to ancestors. Toward 3000 BC, the Longshan culture arose, building on Yangshao foundations, but spreading eastward along the lower Yellow River. Settlements grew larger and more organized. At sites in Shandong and Henan, people constructed rammed earth walls around villages, thick barriers pounded layer by layer for protection. Houses became rectangular, aligned neatly. Pottery advanced remarkably, now shaped on slow wheels, fired to a glossy black finish, with walls so thin they earned the name eggshell pottery. These elegant vessels, plain or subtly incised, held grains or served in rituals. Agriculture intensified, with millet still central, supplemented by rice in wetter areas. Sheep and cattle joined the herds. Social differences appeared. Richer burials with jade ornaments or fine black pots suggested emerging leaders. At Taoxi in Shanxi, a large walled town included what may have been an observatory, a line to track the sun's path, early steps toward understanding seasons for planting. This land was not yet called China, nor its people a single nation. It was a mosaic of villages and clans, bound by the river's rhythm. Floods bringing fertile silt, droughts testing resilience. The Huanghe was both giver and taker, its yellow waters shaping the soil and the lives upon it. Here, in this shared space of river valleys and loess plateaus, a continuous human story unfolded not as a state, but as an enduring way of life rooted in earth and water. And as the sun sets over those ancient plains, casting long shadows across quiet fields, legends begin to stir in the distance, tales of great leaders who would one day tame floods and unite scattered peoples. Among those stories passed down through generations is the memory of the Xia Dynasty, the first to bear the name of a ruling house. The Xia is known today mainly from later historical records, especially the writings of the Han era. According to tradition, it began around 2070 BC, when a leader named Yu succeeded in controlling the frequent floods of the Yellow River. For years, the waters had overwhelmed villages, forcing people to rebuild again and again. Yu, it is said, spent 13 years organizing labor to dig channels and build dikes, guiding the river safely to the sea. In gratitude, the people accepted him as king, and his descendants ruled after him. Archaeologists have searched for clear evidence of this dynasty in the Erlitou culture, centered in the middle Yellow River Valley around modern Henan. Large walled settlements there, dating from about 1900 to 1500 BC, show planned layouts, palaces built on raised platforms of rammed earth, and workshops producing bronze tools and vessels. Whether this was truly the Xia capital remains uncertain, but the scale of these sites suggests powerful chiefs coordinating labor across wide areas. The air around those platforms would have carried the scent of fresh earth being pounded into walls and the steady rhythm of workers' feet as they carried baskets of soil. By around 1600 BC, power shifted eastward. A new dynasty arose, the Shang, and this time the evidence is abundant. Excavations at several sites, most famously at Yingshu near modern Anyang, have uncovered the remains of their last capital. Here, kings ruled from a large settlement with palaces, temples, and royal tombs surrounded by workshops and residential districts. The city lay along the Yuan River, a tributary of the Yellow, where the soil was fertile and water plentiful. In the evenings, smoke from bronze foundries would rise slowly, mixing with the cooler air above the river. The Shang are remembered above all for their mastery of bronze. They cast large ritual vessels, tripods, jars, and square ding used to offer food and wine to ancestors. The process began in clay mold sections carved with intricate designs, touty masks of stylized animals, dragons, and cicadas. Molten bronze was poured in, and when cooled, the vessels emerged heavy and gleaming, their surfaces alive with patterns that caught the firelight during ceremonies. These were not everyday items, but sacred objects, placed in tombs or used in palace halls to maintain contact with the spirits of royal forebears. Just as important was the development of writing. On cattle shoulder blades and turtle shells, diviners carved questions for the ancestors. Will the harvest be good? Should the king go hunting? Will the queen give birth safely? Heat was applied to the bone until it cracked, and the pattern of cracks was read as an answer. The questions, and sometimes the outcomes, were then inscribed in neat columns of early Chinese characters. Over 4,000 different signs have been found. These oracle bones, buried in storage pits at Anyang, form the oldest substantial body of writing in East Asia. You can picture a diviner in a quiet chamber, lamplight flickering on the shell as he carefully cuts each stroke, knowing the words will speak to both the living king and the watchful dead. Power rested on this close bond with ancestors. The king was not seen as divine himself, but as the vital link between his lineage and the spirits who could bring rain, victory, or disaster. Sacrifices of animals and sometimes human retainers accompanied major divinations and burials. Royal tombs at Yingshu were deep pits lined with wooden chambers, filled with bronze vessels, jade ornaments, chariots, and the remains of attendants laid to rest alongside their lord. The silence that settled over those graves afterward must have felt profound, a stillness that honored the continuing presence of the departed. The Shang ruled for more than 5 centuries, their influence reaching across the Yellow River plain and beyond. Yet their world was one of walled cities and allied lords, not a unified empire. Tribute flowed to the king, armies marched under his banner, and bronze workshops supplied weapons and ritual goods. In the quiet intervals between campaigns and harvests, life followed the seasons, planting millet and wheat in spring, tending silkworms among mulberry groves, gathering for ceremonies when the moon was full. And as the last Shang kings performed their final divinations under a darkening sky, new forces gathered in the west, leaders who would challenge the old order and bring a different understanding of heaven's will. Around 1046 BC, King Wu of the Zhou, a state based along the Wei River Valley in modern Shaanxi, led a coalition of allies eastward against the last Shang ruler. At the Battle of Muye, the Shang armies are said to have turned against their own king, and the Zhou emerged victorious. The old capital at Anyang fell silent, its palaces abandoned, bronze foundries cooling in the evening air. In the aftermath, the Zhou established a new dynasty that would shape Chinese political thought for thousands of years. The Zhou divided their rule into 2 long periods. The Western Zhou lasted from about 1046 to 771 BC, with the capital near modern Xi'an. Kings governed directly over a core territory while granting lands to relatives, allies, and local lords in exchange for loyalty and military service. These lords built walled towns, collected taxes in grain and labor, and sent tribute to the royal court. Messengers traveled along packed earth roads, carrying bronze vessels and silk as gifts. In the royal compound, ceremonies followed strict ritual, with music from stone chimes and bells filling the halls during ancestral offerings. The Zhou rulers explained their conquest with a new idea, the mandate of heaven. They claimed that Shang had lost heaven's favor through cruelty and excess, and that heaven now transferred its mandate to the virtuous Zhou. Rule was no longer simply inherited, it depended on moral conduct. A good king cared for the people, performed rituals correctly, and maintained harmony between earth and sky. Neglect or tyranny would bring natural disasters, floods, droughts, earthquakes as warnings. If ignored, heaven could withdraw the mandate and support a new ruler. This concept placed moral responsibility at the heart of power, a quiet but enduring check on absolute authority. In 771 BC, nomadic groups and rebellious lords attacked the western capital. The king was killed, and the court fled east to Luoyang in Henan. This marked the start of the Eastern Zhou, lasting until 256 BC. Direct royal control weakened. The domain shrank to a small area around the new capital. Powerful lords grew into independent states, building larger armies and richer courts. The Zhou king still performed sacred rituals and was honored as the son of heaven, but real authority lay with the regional rulers. Life continued across the Yellow River plain and into the Yangtze Valley. Farmers plowed fields with iron-tipped tools, an innovation spreading during this time. Millet and wheat dominated the north, while rice paddies expanded southward. Villages clustered near rivers, their thatched houses surrounded by mulberry trees for silk. Markets appeared in town centers, where bronze coins began to circulate alongside bundles of cloth or grain. Artisans cast finer bronzes, inlaid with gold and turquoise, their workshops humming through the day. The Eastern Zhou is further divided into the spring and autumn period, 770–476 BC, named after a historical chronicle, and the Warring States period that followed. As central power faded, alliances shifted, borders moved, and warfare became more frequent. Yet culture flourished. Lords patronized scholars and musicians. Ritual vessels grew more elaborate, Writing spread beyond oracle bones to bamboo strips bound into books. Ideas about governance, ethics, and the cosmos began to circulate widely. Through all these changes, the mandate of heaven remained a steady guide. Later historians would use it to explain the rise and fall of every dynasty. A ruler's success or failure was measured not just by military strength, but by the welfare of ordinary people, whether fields were tended, taxes fair, and rituals properly observed. Just as we look to leaders today hoping for wisdom and care, the people of Zhou times watched for signs that heaven still smiled upon the land. And as the states grew stronger and rivalries deepened, thinkers emerged from quiet academies and traveling courts, seeking answers to the growing disorder around them. The Eastern Zhou had fractured into dozens of competing states, each with its own armies, walls, and ambitions. Diplomacy shifted like morning mist, battles echoed across valleys. In this time of uncertainty, known as the Spring and Autumn and Warring States periods, from roughly 770 to 221 BC, people looked for ways to restore stability and meaning. Traveling scholars moved between courts, offering advice to rulers eager for advantage. Ideas spread along trade routes and in private teachings, carried on strips of bamboo bound with cord. The soft scratch of brush on bamboo could often be heard in lamplit studies late into the night. Among the most enduring voices was Confucius, born Kongqiu around 551 BC in the state of Lu, in modern Shandong. He came from a minor noble family fallen on hard times and spent his life as a teacher and minor official. Confucius believed order began with personal virtue. He taught that if individuals cultivated humanness, kindness, and empathy, then families would be harmonious, states well-governed, and the realm peaceful. Rituals, music, and proper behavior were essential, not as empty forms but as ways to refine the heart and align society. He urged rulers to lead by moral example rather than force, and sons to show filial piety toward parents, a duty that extended to ancestors and to the ruler as father of the state. Students gathered around him, memorizing his sayings, which were later collected in the Analects. Even when he wandered between states seeking a lord who would listen, his calm presence and measured words left a lasting mark. You can picture him in a simple robe, sitting with disciples under a tree, discussing how small acts of respect ripple outward like circles on still water. At about the same time, another thinker offered a different path. Laozi, whose name means Old Master, is linked to the short text called the Tao Te Ching. Little is certain about his life. Some say he was an archivist in the Zhou court who grew weary of formalities and rode westward on an ox, leaving the book at the border. The Tao Te Ching speaks of the Tao the way, an unseen flow underlying all things. It advises rulers to govern with wu-wei, effortless action, like water that nourishes without striving. Strength lies in yielding. The soft overcomes the hard. Armies and laws should be used sparingly, for true harmony comes when people live simply and desire little. These ideas appealed to those tired of endless war, offering quiet retreat rather than active reform. Other voices joined the conversation. Mozi, from a humble background, taught universal love, caring for all people equally, not just one's own family or state. He opposed wasteful rituals and aggressive war, organizing disciplined groups to help defend smaller states. His followers built clever siege defenses and promoted merit over birth. Meanwhile, the legalists, especially Han Feizi and Li Si, argued that order required clear laws, strict rewards and punishments, and a strong central authority. Rulers should rely on administrative technique, not personal virtue, to control officials and subjects alike. Debates flourished in the Jixia Academy of Qi State, where scholars received stipends to discuss governance freely. Rulers invited advisors, hoping their ideas would strengthen armies or treasuries. Texts multiplied, Military manuals like Sun Tzu's Art of War, agricultural treatises, astronomical records, iron plows and ox-drawn tools increased harvests, crossbows armed larger armies. Canals linked rivers, easing transport of grain and troops. Cities grew, with markets bustling under tiled roofs, the air filled with the smell of steaming millet and roasted meat. Through all this, people continued daily life. Farmers rose before dawn to tend fields, merchants weighed silk on bronze scales, artisans carved jade in quiet workshops. The turmoil of wars felt distant to many, yet everyone sensed the need for lasting peace. The 100 schools of thought, as they were later called, reflected a shared search for balance, just as we still seek guidance when institutions falter. In the end, one set of ideas would rise above the others, carried forward by a ruthless ruler, determined to end the wars once and for all. From the western state of Qin came a young king ready to impose unity through law, measurement, and unyielding will. In 246 BC, Yingzheng inherited the throne of Qin at age 13. His state had already grown strong under earlier reforms. Strict laws, rewards for merit, in war and farming, and a centralized bureaucracy that reached into every village. Advisors like the legalist Li Si guided the young ruler as he waited to take full power. By 230 BC, with armies equipped with iron weapons and powerful crossbows, Qin began conquering its rivals one by one. Campaigns rolled eastward and southward, state after state falling until, in 221 BC, the last enemy banner lowered. For the first time, the lands of the old Zhou world were joined under a single ruler. Yingzheng declared himself Qin Shi Huang, first emperor of Qin, and the warring centuries came to an end. The new empire stretched from the steppes in the north to the Yangtze Basin in the south, from the eastern sea to the Sichuan mountains. To hold it together, the emperor moved quickly. He abolished the old feudal domains, dividing the land into 36 commanderies run by appointed officials who answered directly to the capital at Xianyang, near modern Xi'an. Nobles from conquered states were relocated to the center, their armies disbanded, their weapons melted into bells and statues. A census counted households for taxes and labor service. Officials traveled on newly built roads wide, straight routes lined with trees carrying orders sealed in red clay. Standardization became the quiet foundation of unity. One script was enforced across the realm, the small seal style, neat and uniform, replacing regional variations. Scribes in every office wrote the same characters, allowing commands to be read from one end of the empire to the other. Weights and measures were fixed bronze models sent out as the official standard, so a jin in the capital weighed the same as a jin in distant Yunnan. Axle widths for carts were set to match the ruts of Qin roads, easing the movement of grain and troops. Even coinage was unified, round copper cash with square holes, strung on cords. To defend against northern nomads, the emperor ordered existing walls of former states linked and extended. Hundreds of thousands of workers, soldiers, convicts, conscripted farmers were sent to the frontiers. They hauled earth and stone in baskets, pounding it layer by layer into thick barriers that followed ridges and valleys. Watchtowers rose at intervals, signal fires ready for night warnings. The work was harsh, many laborers never returned home, yet the walls stood, stretching across hills like a long, silent line against the horizon. In the capital, vast palaces expanded around the Wei River. The Yipang Palace, though unfinished at the emperor's death, covered hundreds of acres with halls and corridors connected by elevated walkways. Copies of conquered palaces were built nearby, a symbolic gathering of the realm under one roof. The emperor traveled in covered carriages along hidden roads, his location kept secret for safety. He sought longevity as fiercely as unity. Alchemists prepared elixirs, expeditions sailed eastward, searching for islands of immortals. In 210 BC, while touring the empire, Qin Shi Huang died far from the capital. His body was carried back in a wagon with salted fish to mask the odor. Li Si and a eunuch concealed the death until they reached Xianyang, then placed the second son on the throne. The first emperor's rule lasted only 15 years as emperor, but it reshaped the land. Borders, administration, script, and roads set patterns that endured long after Qin fell. The cost was heavy forced labor, heavy taxes, book burnings to silence criticism, yet the idea of a single, centralized realm took root. And when the Qin banners finally lowered in 207 BC, exhausted officials and farmers looked to new leaders who promised a gentler path, one guided by the teachings of Confucius rather than the severity of law. In 202 BC, after years of rebellion against the Qin, Liu Bang, a former patrol officer from Pei County, emerged victorious. He took the throne name Emperor Gaozu and founded the Han Dynasty. The capital was set at Chang'an, near the old Qin center, where the Wei River provided water and the surrounding plains offered rich farmland. Palaces rose on rammed earth platforms, their tiled roofs catching the morning sun as officials in long robes began the work of rebuilding a shattered realm. The early Han rulers kept much of the Qin structure, commanderies, taxes, conscript labor, but eased the harshest policies. Punishments were lightened, taxes reduced, and the population allowed to recover. Gaozu and his successors granted large territories to royal relatives as kings, a decision that later brought challenges when those kingdoms grew too powerful. By the reign of Emperor Wu, who ruled from 141 to 87 BC, the Han reached its greatest extent. Armies pushed north against the Xiongnu nomads, securing corridors through Gansu, south into modern Vietnam, west into the Tarim Basin, and northeast into Korea. Garrison towns and signal beacons dotted the frontiers, their watchfires glowing against the night sky. Confucianism gradually became the guiding framework of government. During Emperor Wu's time, the Imperial Academy was established in Chang'an, where scholars studied the 5 classics texts attributed to or edited by Confucius. Candidates for official posts were examined on their knowledge of these works. Confucian ideals of benevolence, ritual propriety, and moral governance shaped court decisions. Rulers were expected to care for the people as a father cares for his children. Officials were chosen for virtue and learning rather than birth alone. State ceremonies honored heaven, earth, and ancestors with measured steps and music from bronze bells. Over generations, this shared education and ethical code bound the elite across distant provinces, giving the empire a common language of duty and harmony. Trade flourished along routes that would later be called the Silk Road. From Chang'an, caravans of 2-humped Bactrian camels carried bolts of silk westward through the Hexi corridor, past jade gates into the deserts beyond Dunhuang. Merchants rested at oasis towns watered by mountain streams, trading silk for horses, glass, grapes, and walnuts from distant lands. In return, Chinese iron tools, lacquerware, and bronze mirrors traveled outward. Envoys like Zhang Qian, sent by Emperor Wu to seek allies against the Xiongnu, returned with tales of far-off regions, Fergana's swift horses, Parthia's vast plains. These exchanges brought new crops such as alfalfa and grapes to Han fields, and quietly carried Buddhist ideas eastward along the same paths. The Han population grew steadily. Improved iron plows, ox-drawn seed drills, and watermills increased harvests of millet, wheat, and rice. Salt and iron production were sometimes state monopolies, filling treasuries for frontier campaigns. Cities expanded. Chang'an held perhaps 500,000 people behind its thick walls, with wide avenues, bustling markets, and wards closed by gates at dusk. Paper was invented during this time, allowing records to be kept more easily than on heavy bamboo strips. Society took clearer shape, The majority identified as Han people named after the dynasty itself, a shared identity rooted in language, script, agriculture, and Confucian values. Even in remote commanderies, officials spoke the same tongue, used the same calendar, and performed the same ancestral rites. This sense of belonging endured long after the dynasty's fall, so that later generations would call themselves Han Chinese. The Han ruled for more than 4 centuries, interrupted briefly in AD 923, when a reformer named Wang Mang seized the throne and founded the Qin dynasty. He attempted sweeping changes: land redistribution, abolition of slavery, new coinage, but met resistance and famine. By AD 25, the Han was restored under Emperor Guangwu, who moved the capital east to Luoyang. The later Han continued many earlier patterns, though frontier defenses weakened and powerful clans gained influence at court. In the 2nd century AD, Yellow Turban rebels and regional warlords rose amid drought and discontent. By 220, the last Han emperor abdicated, and the realm split into 3 competing kingdoms. Yet the institutions, roads, and ideals of the Han lingered in memory, a time when the land felt whole, when Confucian order guided rulers, and when silk caravans connected distant horizons. And as the great houses of the Han faded into twilight, the empire dissolved once more into division, where local lords built their own walls, and the people waited quietly through years of uncertainty. In AD 220, the last Han emperor formally abdicated, and 3 generals who had risen during the rebellions claimed imperial titles. Cao Tao's son established the Wei kingdom in the north, centered on the Yellow River Plain with its capital at Luoyang. Liu Bei, claiming descent from the Han house, founded Shu in the fertile Sichuan basin to the southwest. Sun Quan ruled Wu along the lower Yangtze with its capital at Jianye, modern Nanjing, where rivers and lakes provided natural defenses. These 3 kingdoms competed for legitimacy and territory, their armies marching along old Han roads while farmers continued planting millet and rice in the fields below. The period is remembered through both history and later romance. Battles like Red Cliffs in 208, where fire ships drifted across the Yangtze in the night, shifted alliances and preserved the balance for decades. Wei held the largest population and strongest cavalry, drawn from northern pastures. Shu controlled mountainous routes and granaries. Wu mastered river and sea warfare, its shipyards busy with the sound of hammers on planks. Courts maintained Han rituals, officials in silk robes performing sacrifices, scholars copying classics on newly invented paper. Trade moved cautiously along waterways, carrying salt from Sichuan, tea from the south, iron from the center. Wei conquered Shu in 263, but exhaustion soon followed. In 265, a Wei general named Sima Yan forced abdication and founded the Jin dynasty, briefly reuniting the realm by taking Wu in 280. Celebrations filled the palaces at Luoyang as envoys arrived with tribute, yet unity proved fragile. Jin emperors granted vast lands to royal princes to secure loyalty, much as early Han had done. When the second emperor proved weak, rivalries among the princes erupted into the War of the 8 Princes from 291 to 306. Armies ravaged the north, cities burned, and famine spread. Refugees streamed southward across the Yangtze, carrying books, tools, and family altars. By 316, non-Chinese groups from the northern steppes Xiongnu, Xianbei, Di, Qiang overran the Jin capital. The north fragmented into short-lived kingdoms, known later as the 16 States. Rulers adopted Chinese titles and administration while maintaining tribal armies. Warfare was frequent, populations displaced, irrigation canals neglected. Yet Buddhist monasteries grew, offering refuge and teaching literacy. Steles carved with sutras stood beside roads, their stone surfaces cool under travelers' hands. In the south, a branch of the Jin house survived, moving the capital to Jiangkang, modern Nanjing. This eastern Jin and the successor southern dynasties Liu Song, southern Qi, Liang, Chen lasted until 589. Aristocratic clans from old northern families dominated court and land, building elegant villas amid lakes and bamboo groves. Literature and calligraphy flourished. Poets gathered for evening conversations, brushes moving smoothly across paper. Buddhism deepened its roots, with emperors sponsoring temples and monks translating scriptures in quiet halls, scented with incense. The north eventually stabilized under the Northern Wei, founded by the Xianbei Tuoba clan in 386. They unified the Yellow River region by 439, moving their capital to Luoyang and adopting Chinese customs, wearing robes instead of trousers, encouraging intermarriage, promoting Confucianism alongside Buddhism. Massive cave temples at Yungang and Longmen were carved into cliffs, stone figures gazing serenely over passing caravans. Through 4 centuries of division, the people endured. Farmers repaired dikes after floods, merchants found safe routes, families preserved ancestral tablets. Chinese script, classics, and rituals continued in both north and south. The idea of a single cultural realm persisted even when political maps changed yearly. And when a new northern dynasty finally grew strong enough to cross the Yangtze, the land prepared for reunion under rulers who blended old traditions with fresh energy from the frontiers. In 581, Yang Jian, a northern general of mixed Chinese and Xianbei descent, seized power and founded the Sui dynasty. He completed the conquest of the south in 589, ending nearly 3 centuries of division. The capital returned to Chang'an, rebuilt on a grand grid with wide avenues and walled wards. The Grand Canal was dug in stages, linking the Yellow River to the Yangtze and beyond, allowing grain barges to sail from the rich south to the northern heartland. Yet heavy labor service and failed campaigns into Korea exhausted the people. In 618, after rebellions spread, Li Yuan, a Sui general stationed in Taiyuan, marched on Chang'an and declared the Tang dynasty. His son, Emperor Taizong, who soon took the throne, is remembered as one of China's greatest rulers. The Tang Empire expanded steadily. Taizong defeated the Eastern Turks in 630, securing the northern steppes and opening safe passage for caravans. Armies pushed west into the Tarim Basin, establishing protectorates that reached as far as modern Afghanistan. To the south, influence extended into northern Vietnam. Tribute arrived from Korea and Japan. Chang'an became the largest city in the world, its walls enclosing over 1 million residents. Foreign quarters housed Sogdian merchants, Persian jewelers, and Central Asian musicians. Markets divided into east and west bustled from dawn, with stalls selling silk, tea, porcelain, and spices under striped awnings. The air carried the scent of roasting lamb from Turkic vendors and the faint smoke of incense from nearby temples. Buddhism reached its height of influence. Monasteries owned vast estates, managed mills, and lent money. The monk Xuanzang traveled to India between 629 and 645, returning with hundreds of Sanskrit texts. In Chang'an, he worked in the Big Wild Goose Pagoda, translating sutras with teams of scholars. Stone caves at Dunhuang preserved thousands of manuscripts and wall paintings showing donors in Tang robes. Empress Wu Zetian, who ruled in her own name from 690 to 705, patronized Buddhism heavily, commissioning massive statues and declaring herself a Chakravartin, a universal ruler in Buddhist terms. Temples rang with bells at dusk, their courtyards shaded by old trees. Culture flourished alongside trade. The Tang perfected the civil service examinations begun under Sui, drawing talented men from across the realm to staff the bureaucracy. poetry became the voice of the educated elite. Li Bai wandered freely, writing of wine, mountains, and moonlight. Du Fu observed war and hardship with quiet compassion. Wang Wei painted landscapes in both brush and verse. Gatherings in garden pavilions lasted late, with lute music drifting over ponds. Calligraphy reached new refinement, the bold strokes of Yan Zhenqing still studied today. Women enjoyed greater freedom than in later eras. Princesses played polo. Upper-class ladies rode horses and attended banquets. Foot-binding had not yet spread. Textile workshops produced brocades in brilliant colors, patterns influenced by Central Asian designs. The dynasty's peak came under Emperor Xuanzong, who reigned from 712 to 756. Early in his rule, peace and prosperity seemed endless. Yet heavy spending, reliance on frontier generals, and court intrigue weakened central control. In 755, the general, and Lushan himself of Sogdian and Turkic descent, rebelled. His armies seized Luoyang and advanced on Chang'an, forcing the emperor to flee south. Though the rebellion was crushed by 763 with Uyghur help, the Tang never fully recovered. Regional military governors grew powerful, taxes faltered, and the canal silted in places. The later Tang saw periodic revival but gradual decline. Emperors struggled to control warlords, eunuchs dominated the palace. In 907, a final warlord forced the last boy emperor to abdicate, ending the dynasty. Yet the Tang left a lasting image of openness and achievement, roads stretching to distant oases, poems copied in quiet studies, temples standing against blue skies. And as the great capital's gates closed for the last time, innovators in the south and east carried forward new ways of printing, trading, and governing that would define the next chapter. After the Tang collapse, China entered a half-century of division known as the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms. Warlords ruled small states in the north, more stable kingdoms controlled the south. In 960, a general named Zhou Guangyin staged a mutiny at Kaifeng on the Yellow River Plain, accepted the abdication of his young lord, and founded the Song dynasty. To prevent future coups, he invited fellow generals to a banquet, urged them to retire with generous pensions, and centralized military command under the throne. The capital was set at Kaifeng, later called Bianjing, where the Grand Canal met fertile fields, making grain supply reliable. The Song reunited most of the old Tang territory by 979, though it never regained the far west or full control of the northern frontier. Relations with the Khitan Liao dynasty to the northeast and later the Tangut Sha in the northwest required annual payments of silk and silver to keep peace. In 1127, Jurchen forces from beyond the Liao overran Kaifeng, capturing the emperor and much of the court. The Song house fled south, establishing a new capital at Hangzhou known then as Lin'an in the lush Yangtze Delta. This southern Song lasted until 1279, smaller in land but richer in commerce. Despite military weakness, the Song era saw remarkable advances. Movable type printing, first using clay and then wood blocks, spread books widely. Government offices published agricultural manuals, medical texts, and the Confucian classics. Private printers produced almanacs, poetry collections, and exam preparation guides. Paper money appeared in Sichuan by the 11th century, backed by government deposits, easing trade as copper coins grew heavy for large transactions. The magnetic compass, known earlier, was refined for navigation. Chinese junks with watertight compartments and stern-post rudders sailed to Southeast Asia, India, and East Africa. Gunpowder weapons emerged gradually. Early formulas mixed saltpeter, sulfur, and charcoal for incendiary bombs launched by trebuchets. By the 13th century, fire lances, bamboo tubes, shooting flame and shrapnel, and iron-cased bombs defended city walls. Yet these could not fully offset the Song's smaller armies against nomadic cavalry. The economy flourished as never before. Rice varieties from Champa allowed double cropping in the south, feeding a population that reached perhaps 100 million. Irrigation pumps, wheelbarrows, and improved plows raised yields. Tea plantations expanded on hillsides. Porcelain kilns at Jingdezhen produced fine white wares for export. Coastal ports like Quanzhou welcomed Arab, Persian, and Korean ships. Guilds organized artisans in cities. Markets operated day and night under lantern light. Kaifeng and later Hangzhou each held over 1 million residents, their streets lined with shops, tea houses, and theaters. Confucian scholarship deepened. Jushi synthesized earlier teachings into Neo-Confucianism, emphasizing moral self-cultivation, study of the classics, and the underlying principle in all things. His commentaries became standard for the civil service examinations, which now drew thousands of candidates every 3 years. Successful scholars filled a growing bureaucracy that managed taxes, granaries, and welfare programs. Art reflected refined tastes. Landscape paintings on silk scrolls captured mist-shrouded mountains and quiet rivers. Monochrome ink on paper conveyed subtle tones. Scholars collected antiques, brewed tea in ceramic bowls, and composed regulated verse in garden pavilions. Yet prosperity rested on fragile borders. Tribute payments strained treasuries. Military reforms often failed. In the north, the Jurchen Jin and later the Mongols pressed steadily southward. Hangzhou's lakes and bridges offered beauty but little defense. And when Mongol horsemen finally encircled the southern capital in 1279, the last Song fleet sailed out to sea with a child emperor aboard, choosing the waves over surrender. In 1279, after a final naval battle off the coast of Guangdong, the Mongol-led forces claimed victory. The Song court ended, and China became part of the largest land empire the world had yet seen, the Yuan Dynasty, founded by the descendants of Genghis Khan. Genghis himself had begun the conquests early in the 13th century, uniting the Mongol tribes on the northern steppes and then turning south. His armies overran the Jurchen Jin in 1234, gaining control of the Yellow River Plain. His grandson Mengke continued the push, but it was Kublai Khan who completed the task. Declared Great Khan in 1260, Kublai moved his main court closer to Chinese lands, first to Kaifeng, and then to a new capital built north of the old Jin city. He named it Dadu, Great Capital, today's Beijing. Wide streets were laid out on a grid, with palaces of wood and tile surrounded by lakes, dug for pleasure and defense. In summer, the court retreated to Shangdu Xanadu in Inner Mongolia, where green pastures allowed horses to graze near marble halls. Kublai declared the Yuan dynasty in 1271, taking a Chinese-style reign name, but he ruled as a Mongol emperor. The realm stretched from the Pacific to the Caspian, with post stations every 25 miles where riders changed horses, carrying messages across continents in days. Persian astronomers worked in Dadu's observatory. Muslim engineers managed tax records. Tibetan lamas advised on religious affairs. Merchants like Marco Polo, if his account is trusted, traveled safely under imperial protection, describing markets filled with silk, porcelain, and spices. Within China proper, administration blended Mongol and Chinese systems. The population was divided into 4 legal classes: Mongols at the top, then Central Asians and Persians, followed by Northern Chinese and former Jurchen subjects, with Southern Chinese former Song territory at the bottom. Key posts went to non-Chinese to prevent rebellion. Yet Confucian scholars were employed in lower offices, and the civil service examinations were briefly restored late in the dynasty, though on a small scale. Land taxes were collected in paper money, printed in large quantities from woodblocks, a practice that spread to grain and salt quotas. Agriculture continued much as before. Rice paddies in the Yangtze Delta, wheat and millet in the north, canals kept clear for transport. Cotton planting expanded in the south, its fiber spun and woven in village homes. Drama flourished. Yuanquo plays performed on stages in city squares, with arias telling stories of loyalty and love. Painters like Zhou Mengfu served at court, blending traditional ink techniques with a freer style. Buddhism, especially Tibetan forms, received strong patronage. Kublai granted titles to lamas and built stupas, white against the northern sky. Taoist and Confucian temples operated quietly, though Taoist texts were once burned in a dispute over authenticity. The Yuan lasted less than a century in China. Heavy spending on palaces, campaigns into Japan and Southeast Asia, and flood relief strained resources. Paper money lost value as more was printed. Yellow River floods in the 1340s. Salt smugglers and rebel bands grew bold. By 1351, groups wearing red turbans rose in the Huai River region, led by men claiming divine mandates. One leader, Zhou Yuanzhang, a former monk and laborer, gathered strength in the south. In 1368, his armies entered Dadu. The last Yuan emperor fled north with his court, continuing a rump khanate on the steppes. Palaces in the capital were left empty, their roofs echoing in the wind. And as the Mongol banners withdrew across the grasslands, a new Chinese dynasty prepared to restore native rule, rebuilding walls and sending ships across distant oceans. In 1368, Zhou Yuanzhang, once a poor orphan who had joined the Red Turban rebels, entered Dadu, accepted the Yuan surrender, and proclaimed the Ming dynasty. He took the reign name Hongwu and moved the capital south to Nanjing on the Yangtze, where river traffic ensured steady grain supplies. The old Mongol palaces in the north were left to decay, their wooden beams gathering dust in empty halls. Hongwu ruled with firm control. He abolished the prime minister post, dividing duties among 6 ministries that reported directly to the throne. Suspected plotters were purged harshly. Land was redistributed from large estates to small farmers. Tax registers were updated village by village, and yellow household registers tracked every family. Corvée labor rebuilt canals and dikes after years of neglect. The emperor himself rose before dawn to read memorials, his vermilion brush marking approvals in the quiet palace. His son, the Yongle emperor, seized the throne in 1402 after a civil war and moved the capital north to Beijing in 1421. The Forbidden City was constructed on the old Yuan site, vast courtyards, golden tiled halls, and red walls enclosing the imperial household. Laborers hauled massive stone beams from quarries southwest of the city, dragging them over ice in winter. To the north, the Great Wall was rebuilt and extended. Earlier earthen barriers were faced with brick, watchtowers added at regular intervals, and garrisons stationed along the line from the sea at Shanhaiguan to Jiayuguan in the desert west. Soldiers farmed nearby fields between patrols, their signal fires ready on high platforms. At the same time, the Ming looked outward by sea. From 1405 to 1433, the eunuch admiral Zheng He led 7 grand fleets southward and westward. Built at Nanjing's Longjiang shipyards, the largest treasure ships measured over 400 feet, with 9 masts and watertight compartments. Hundreds of vessels, supply ships, troop carriers, water tankers carried 20,000 men on the first voyage. They sailed to Vietnam, Java, Sumatra, Malacca, Ceylon, and the Indian coast, reaching Hormuz on the Persian Gulf and the East African shore near modern Kenya. Envoys brought tribute: giraffes, zebras, ostriches, spices, gems. Chinese porcelain, silk, and lacquer were exchanged in bustling ports. Coastal rulers sent missions to Beijing, acknowledging Ming prestige. The fleets returned with charts of winds and currents, logs filled with descriptions of foreign lands. Yet, after 1433, the voyages ended. Court debates favored conserving resources for northern defenses and canal maintenance. Shipyards were closed, large ocean-going vessels prohibited. Records of the expeditions were later scattered or destroyed, leaving only fragments. Trade continued privately through smaller junks, but official maritime reach withdrew. Inside the realm, stability returned. Agriculture prospered with new crops from abroad: maize, sweet potatoes, peanuts introduced quietly through trade routes. Population grew, silver from Japan and the Americas entering via Manila galleons fueled markets. Porcelain kilns at Jingdezhen produced blue and white wares for export and court. Literature expanded. Novels like Journey to the West and Romance of the Three Kingdoms circulated in printed editions. Scholars prepared for examinations in the growing number of academies, debating Neo-Confucian texts under shaded courtyards. The Ming lasted nearly 3 centuries, its middle years marked by competent administration and full granaries. Later, emperors withdrew from daily governance, leaving power to eunuchs who controlled palace workshops and secret police. Taxes lagged, postal stations fell into disrepair, northern garrisons went unpaid. In the 1630s and 1640s, drought and famine struck the north. Rebel armies gathered. Li Zicheng captured Beijing in 1644, the last Ming emperor hanging himself on Coal Hill behind the palace. A Ming general at the Great Wall frontier called on Manchu forces for aid against the rebels. The Manchus entered, crushed Li, and claimed the mandate for themselves. And as the Dragon Throne passed to new rulers from beyond the wall, the realm faced both expansion and the slow approach of Western ships on eastern horizons. In 1644, the Manchu forces of Nurhaci's descendants crossed the Great Wall, defeated the rebel Li Zicheng, and entered Beijing. The young Shunji emperor was placed on the throne, beginning the Qing dynasty, the last imperial house of China. The Manchus, a semi-nomadic people from the forests northeast of the wall, had organized into banners, military and administrative units that combined cavalry skill with disciplined governance. Over the next decades, they completed the conquest. Taiwan taken in 1683, Outer Mongolia brought under control, and resistance in the south gradually suppressed. By the early 18th century, the Qing ruled a territory larger than any previous dynasty, stretching from Siberia to the South China Sea, from the Pamirs to the Pacific. 3 emperors shaped the dynasty's peak: Kangxi, reigning from 1661 to 1722, consolidated power, personally touring the realm, inspecting canals, and patronizing scholarship. He sponsored a massive encyclopedia and Jesuit maps that accurately charted the empire. Yongzheng, his son, ruled briefly but intensely from 1722 to 1735, tightening finances, creating the Grand Council for secret policy discussions, and rooting out corruption among officials. Qianlong, ascending in 1735 and abdicating in 1796 after 60 years, oversaw the greatest territorial growth. Campaigns subdued the Zhunga Mongols in Xinjiang, securing the northwest. Tribute missions arrived from Burma, Nepal, and Korea. The court at Beijing's Forbidden City expanded with summer palaces and gardens northwest of the city, where lakes reflected pavilions in the afternoon light. Administration blended Manchu and Chinese traditions. Manchu and Mongol bannermen held key military posts. Chinese officials filled most civil positions, selected through rigorous examinations in the Confucian classics. The banner system provided land and stipends, keeping a separate elite loyal to the throne. Emperors performed Confucian rituals at the altar of heaven and shamanic sacrifices in the palace. Population grew rapidly from perhaps 150 million in 1700 to over 400 million by 1850, fed by New World crops like maize and sweet potatoes on hillside fields. Trade flourished under restrictions. The Canton system, formalized in 1757, confined Western merchants to one port, Guangzhou, where licensed Chinese guilds handled exchanges. Silver flowed in for tea, porcelain and silk. British and American ships waited months for cargoes in the humid river anchorage. Jesuit painters and clockmakers worked at court. Chinese artisans produced export wares painted with European scenes. Signs of strain appeared in the late 18th century. Qianlong's later years saw corruption scandals. Frontier campaigns drained treasuries. The White Lotus Rebellion from 1796 to 1804 required years to suppress. Population pressure led to migration into marginal lands. Soil erosion followed on upland slopes. Western pressure mounted in the 19th century. Britain, seeking balanced trade, sent Lord Macartney in 1793 and Lord Amherst in 1816. Both embassies failed to secure broader access. Opium, imported by British merchants to reverse the silver outflow, spread widely despite bans. In 1839, Lin Zexu confiscated and destroyed opium stocks in Guangzhou, leading to the First Opium War. British steamships and modern artillery easily defeated Qing forces. The 1842 Treaty of Nanjing opened 5 ports, ceded Hong Kong, and imposed indemnities. Further conflicts, the Second Opium War of 1856, 1860 brought more concessions. Foreign legations in Beijing, missionary rights inland, legalization of opium. Internal crises erupted simultaneously. The Taiping Rebellion, led by Hong Xiuquan, who claimed to be Christ's younger brother, swept the Yangtze Valley from 1851 to 1864. Armies numbering millions devastated central China. Nanjing became the Taiping capital until retaken amid great loss of life. Regional armies raised by Chinese officials, most famously Zheng Guofan's Xiang army, finally crushed the rebellion, but left provinces semi-autonomous. Other uprisings, Nian in the north, Muslim revolts in Yunnan and Xinjiang further weakened the center. Empress Dowager Cixi dominated court politics after 1861, guiding the Tongji and Guangxu emperors while conservative factions resisted reform. The 1894-1895 war with Japan ended in defeat. Taiwan was ceded, Korea lost. The Boxer Rebellion of 1900, supported by Cixi against foreign influence, led to an 8-nation invasion and occupation of Beijing. Indemnities crippled finances. The dynasty's final decade saw hurried modernization, new armies, schools, railways, but too late. In 1911, military mutinies in Wuchang spread rapidly. Provinces declared independence. On the 12th of February 1912, the 6-year-old Puyi abdicated, ending more than 2,000 years of imperial rule. And as the dragon flags came down from palace gates, voices rose calling for republic, revolution, and a new place among nations. In October 1911, a mutiny in Wuchang sparked uprisings across provinces. Qing governors lost control as local assemblies and new armies declared independence. Sun Yat-sen, a revolutionary long in exile, returned from abroad and was chosen provisional president of a new Republic of China in Nanjing on the 1st of January 1912. To avoid further war, he stepped aside for Yuan Shikai, the powerful Qing general who negotiated the abdication. Yuan moved the capital back to Beijing and took the presidency in March. The imperial era ended quietly, the young ex-emperor Puyi allowed to remain in the Forbidden City under supervision. The early republic struggled from the start. Yuan dissolved the new parliament in 1914, declared himself emperor in 1915, and died amid opposition in 1916. Power fragmented among warlords who controlled provinces, collected taxes, and fielded private armies. Beijing governments changed frequently, issuing orders few obeyed. Railways, mines, and customs revenues fell under foreign loans and management. Students, merchants, and officers looked for ways to strengthen the nation. In 1919, news that the Versailles Treaty awarded Germany's Shandong concessions to Japan triggered protests in Beijing on May 4. Students marched through the streets, calling for science, democracy, and an end to warlord rule. The May 4th movement spread ideas of cultural renewal and political reform through new journals and vernacular writing. Universities in Beijing and Shanghai became centers of debate. Sun Yat-sen had reorganized his party as the Kuomintang KMT and set up a base in Guangzhou. With Soviet aid from 1923, he admitted communists to the KMT, trained officers at the Whampoa Military Academy, and planned a northern expedition to unify the country. After Sun's death in 1925, Chiang Kai-shek emerged as military leader. In 1926, 1928, the National Revolutionary Army advanced northward, capturing the Yangtze cities and then Beijing, renamed Beiping. Chiang established a national government in Nanjing in 1928, recognized by Western powers. Warlords nominally submitted, though many kept local control. Tensions within the alliance soon surfaced. In April 1927, Chiang purged communists in Shanghai and other cities, executing thousands. The Chinese Communist Party, CCP, led by Mao Zedong and others, survived in rural bases, especially Jinggangshan in Jiangxi. By 1931, they proclaimed a Chinese Soviet Republic there, redistributing land and organizing peasant soviets. Chiang launched 5 encirclement campaigns. The 5th in 1934 forced the communists to break out on the Long March. Over 8,000 kilometers through mountains and rivers, fewer than 1 in 10 reached the northwest base at Yan'an by 1935. Meanwhile, Japan expanded in the northeast. In 1931, officers staged the Mukden Incident and occupied Manchuria, setting up the puppet state of Manchukuo. In 1937, fighting near Beijing escalated into full war. Japanese forces took Shanghai after fierce battle, then Nanjing in December, committing widespread atrocities. The national government retreated inland to Chongqing in Sichuan, enduring years of bombing from mountain-dug shelters. Communists in Yan'an expanded guerrilla bases behind Japanese lines, gaining peasant support through rent reduction and resistance. A second united front between KMT and CCP held uneasily against Japan. American aid arrived after Pearl Harbor in 1941. Chinese armies tied down millions of Japanese troops. When Japan surrendered in August 1945, the country lay exhausted, cities ruined, inflation rampant, millions displaced. Peace talks in Chongqing failed. By 1946, full civil war resumed. Communist forces, reorganized and experienced in mobile warfare, captured Manchuria's Japanese arms and grew rapidly. KMT armies, spread thin and undermined by corruption, lost key battles. In 1949, Communist troops crossed the Yangtze, took Nanjing, then Shanghai and Guangzhou. On October 1, Mao Zedong proclaimed the People's Republic of China from Tiananmen Gate in Beijing. Chiang and remaining KMT forces withdrew to Taiwan. And as the red flag rose over the land, a new era began, one of sweeping change, rebuilding, and the long continuity of an ancient civilization stepping firmly into the modern world. On the 1st of October 1949, Mao Zedong stood atop Tiananmen and proclaimed the People's Republic of China. Beijing became the capital once more, its wide avenues cleared for parades while workers repaired war-damaged factories and railways. The Communist Party moved quickly to consolidate power. Land was redistributed from landlords to peasants, industries nationalized, marriage laws reformed to grant women equal rights. By 1956, most private enterprise had been absorbed into state or collective ownership. Campaigns encouraged literacy classes in villages, where kerosene lamps lit evening lessons on simple characters. The early 1950s saw recovery. Soviet advisors helped build steel mills and power plants. The first 5-year plan focused on heavy industry. Railways extended into the southwest and northwest, bridges spanned the Yangtze. Yet political movements followed. The 100 Flowers campaign of 1956 invited criticism, only to be reversed in the anti-rightist drive that sent hundreds of thousands of intellectuals to labor in the countryside. In 1958, the Great Leap Forward sought rapid industrialization through backyard steel furnaces and large agricultural communes. Reports of high yields were exaggerated, resources were diverted from farms. Combined with poor weather, this led to widespread famine from 1959 to 1961. Tens of millions perished in the quiet fields of rural China. Recovery came slowly. Moderates like Liu Shaoqi and Deng Xiaoping gained influence, emphasizing practical incentives for farmers. Then, in 1966, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution to purge perceived capitalist tendencies. Red Guards, mostly students, traveled the country, closing schools, denouncing teachers, destroying old books and temples. Factional fighting disrupted cities and factories for years. By 1969, many urban youth were sent to rural areas to learn from the peasants. The movement wound down after Mao's death in September 1976. The Gang of Four, including his wife Jiang Qing, were arrested soon after. In 1978, Deng Xiaoping emerged as paramount leader. At a party meeting in December, he steered policy toward reform and opening. Special economic zones were established in coastal cities like Shenzhen, near Hong Kong, offering tax breaks to foreign investors. Farmers regained household plots under the responsibility system, dramatically raising grain output. Factories introduced bonuses and market pricing. Township enterprises sprang up in rural areas, producing clothes, toys, and electronics. By the 1980s, city markets filled with goods again: bicycles, radios, colorful fabrics. Students returned to universities, entrance exams resumed. Growth accelerated through the 1990s and the 2000s. Infrastructure expanded: highways, airports, high-speed rail lines linking Beijing to Guangzhou in hours. Shanghai's Pudong district rose from farmland into towers of glass and steel. Private companies flourished alongside state firms. Millions migrated from villages to coastal factories. Living standards improved steadily. Color televisions, refrigerators, then mobile phones and cars became common. The one-child policy, introduced in 1979, slowed population growth but reshaped family life. China rejoined international bodies: the United Nations seat in 1971, WTO membership in 2001. Trade surpluses funded overseas investments. Ports and railways extended influence through the Belt and Road Initiative. Technological advance followed. Companies like Huawei, Alibaba, and Tencent grew into global players. Space missions landed on the moon. Supercomputers ranked among the world's fastest. Challenges remain: environmental damage from rapid industry smog over cities, Polluted rivers prompted shifts toward cleaner energy. Income gaps widened between coast and interior, city and countryside. Political control tightened. The party maintains leadership over state, army, and media. Historical memory is carefully shaped. Museums honor revolutionary struggle. Ancient sites like the Forbidden City draw millions of visitors each year. Today, China stands as the world's second-largest economy, its cities bright with neon at night, villages connected by paved roads. High-speed trains glide across landscapes where rice terraces still climb hills as they have for centuries. People honor ancestors at Qing, gather for spring festival banquets, study classical poetry alongside coding and finance. Through millennia, from the quiet settlements along the Yellow River to the bustling ports of the present, the land has seen dynasties rise and fall, borders shift, ideas arrive and adapt. Farmers still follow seasons, families preserve ties across generations, scholars debate harmony and governance. The rhythm continues, innovation built on memory, change rooted in continuity.